I was being trailed, both with two people on a motorcycle and a car at the same time. I was able to notice the trailing for 3 days. It would start immediately at office and reach home. And so I thought that really that was, previously you could have a border trailing you or a car trailing you, but this time they were both. And I thought that really my life was in danger. But also another incident during the campaign for removal of age limit, I was almost bumped off at my gate. And so I had been trailed over a distance. And as I entered the gate, the border with two people knocked the gate and wanted to force themselves in. Fortunately, they were repelled at that moment, but I thought that really that was also too much. But we are trailed on a daily basis. We are surveilled physically and cyber-wise. Our website, as much as getting all the security certificates that exist, is hit almost on a monthly basis. Brought down, you go to check and it's down, and you even wonder what is it that people will be looking for. Recently, we've had people trying to walk into this office, and you see them on the CCTV coverage. You inform police, and yes, and this is as recent as last week and this week. So that's what we go through, and we need to build social support around us. Who can I call? Who can I share with? Who can help me? Who can help me cross? It is very important, and that's the advice I would share with fellow women activists.
Sarah Bireete is well known in Uganda as a woman, activist, and civil society leader. She's known for her untiring push for democracy and good governance in Uganda. Her activism was more by chance rather than choice.
And having pursued mathematics at A level, my first line of education was actually business, a Bachelor of Commerce. And law is my second degree. And I had no idea that I would be caught up in this while growing up. But all through my life, I never wanted to see anybody's rights being taken away. So as a child, I would fight people who were in the habit of beating their children. I would be there challenging them on why they would beat their children and why they can't find other means of disciplining and raising their children. I used to push back with my siblings about people who were beating their wives, young boys who would beat their mothers. We would be there to push back and stand with these victims of human rights violations. So that element of standing up, I did not know that I would end up doing this work for almost the rest of my life. I never knew that.
Born in a family of 9, Sarah was the third child. Her determination and her activism was not particularly strange in a family where the father and some of her siblings were all involved in activism in one way or another. However, what Sarah got to experience was exceptionally terrifying when she was targeted and dragged to court by the government of Yoweri Museveni. Sarah Bireete was charged by the Anti-Corruption Court with embezzlement and abuse of office in 2009 in her role as National Coordinator of the International Conference of the Great Lake Regions at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Although this was widely seen as a politically motivated trial, but it also served for some as a cautionary tale. Luckily, her family stood by her.
My mother used to be extremely terrified. As the space kept shrinking, people would ask her to tell me to stop what I'm doing. Others would randomly pass unpleasant comments in public places. But with time, she accepted that that's the life I have to live. And she does her best as a parent to support. She's a born again, and she resorts to the Bible and prayer. To my immediate family, they are supportive, but at times they get scared. Depending on what we are going through at the moment, they get scared, they get concerned. During elections, my children, after the arrest of 28 CSO leaders and observers that I was with in the same venue, so when they had the news, the next day they tried to lock the gate so that I don't get out of home, because my colleagues were being arrested and they could not understand what I was going out to do. Yet we had to go and stand with them. So at times they get distressed by the work that we do. Of course they do, but at times they are distressed. But they know I can't withdraw from it, and they do the best to support me. I experienced that blackmail for 10 years of my life.
She was convicted in 2019, even though her attorneys argued that the sentence was in spite of prosecution evidence from the police investigation that indicated that the then permanent secretary in the ministry and the cashier were at fault for the loss of the funds. The High Court sentenced her to 10 years imprisonment. She appealed to the Court of Appeal. In 2016, the court acquitted her on the charge of abuse of office, but maintained the conviction for embezzlement. She appealed this decision to the Supreme Court. In 2020, the court acquitted her of embezzlement as well. Sarah was branded, shunned, and ostracized by some during this difficult decade, but she persevered. What helped her through this difficult time?
I was saved by two things. I had a close, knitted web of friends, very extremely supportive friends that would be there for me all the time, that would be there for my family, especially my young children. And of course, a very wonderful family that stood with me all through the 10 years. I also had my conscience. My clear conscience kept me going because I knew I had done nothing wrong. I was not scared of anybody. I was not ashamed of anything. And I knew with the time, the courts would clear my record. And indeed, at the right time, they did. But it was a very terrifying moment. I know many people have not recovered themselves from such nightmare. Many people have completely phased out of life. Even when their names have been cleared, you can't even have a trace of where they are because of the stigmatization, because of the way they think they are perceived. And whoever planned that move, I think the aim was to finish off my prime life at then.
Sarah is now the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Governance that she founded in 2011. And it has not been easy in a country like Uganda, where civil society organizations are targeted through legislated restrictions.
I'm part of the founders of the Center for Constitutional Governance, but the second executive director. I spent 9.5 years as the deputy executive director, which gave me time to learn how to coordinate with others, build social bases, and solidarity, especially amongst fellow CSO leaders. Now I've been the executive director for 3 years and a few months, but every other passing day, the civic space in Uganda closes. As we talk today, it's one day after the assent of the President to the Computer Misuse Act, an act that is going to take away the social media freedoms of Ugandans, an act that seeks to take away dissent and criticism, mainly of government leaders, with the very draconian and unfortunate punishments, with arrests. So every other day comes with new challenges. We have the NGOs that were suspended last year that have not been re-registered again. We have compliance with the 11 organizations in Uganda, including the Data Protection and ANITA, the NGO Bureau, the Uganda Registration Services, the KCCA, URA, NSSF. You can spend a whole year complying, including the Financial Intelligence Authority, which is established to prevent economic crimes and evil money from coming into the economy, but their biggest concentration is on NGOs in Uganda. And then, of course, we have the toxic political context that we operate under, where civil society organizations have been branded as #1 enemy of the state, and charges now trumped up. Charges against NGO leaders range from terrorism. Last year we had 2 of our leaders summoned over terrorism and funding terrorism, something that cannot happen in our space. And by the time you get yourself out of such terrible charges, it could be a decade, like the one I just finished, over trumped up corruption charges. So we are in this context where you need to believe in what you're doing, think that the people who slump these charges against civic leaders will have some bit of common sense prevail over them, but also you are prepared for any eventuality, any time, including breaking of our offices, including stealing of our documents, including bringing down our website, which happens almost on a daily basis, including hacking our communication, which happens non-stop, including physical trail. So we have terrible cyber and physical trail as persons working in the NGO sector in Uganda. It's very terrible, but we believe that one day sanity might return to our country and there will be justice for all. The problem with that period of deregistration is that most of your partners, it takes away legitimacy. Most of your partners withdraw because nobody would want to work with a perceived illegal entity. So even when you reopen, depending on the duration you take, then you have to rebuild. And if you do not have a very good understanding of the context by your partners, then you lose those partnerships.
The fear that the government in Uganda instills in civil society leaders is through trials, charges, and lawfare. Some potential threats for civil and political leaders include terrorism or corruption charges.
Charges now trumped up. Charges against NGO leaders range from terrorism, Last year we had two of our leaders summoned over terrorism and funding terrorism, something that cannot happen in our space. And by the time you get yourself out of such terrible charges, it could be a decade, like the one I just finished over trumped-up corruption charges. So we are in this context where you need to believe in what you're doing, think that the people who slump these charges against civic leaders will have some bit of common sense prevail over them, but also you are prepared for any eventuality, any time, including breaking of our offices, including stealing of our documents, including bringing down our website, which happens almost on a daily basis, including hacking our communication, which happens non-stop, including physical trial. So we have terrible cyber and physical trial as persons working in the NGO sector in Uganda. It's very terrible, but we believe that one day sanity might return to our country and there will be justice for all. We are surveilled physically and cyber-wise. Our website, as much as getting all the security certificates that exist, is hit almost on a monthly basis, brought down, you go to check and it's down, and you even wonder what is it that people will be looking for. Recently, we've had people trying to walk into this office, and you see them on the CCTV coverage, you inform police, and yes, and this is as recent as last week and this week. So that's what we go through.
The international media and civil society are not necessarily a pillar of support either, as oftentimes there is a tendency to glaze over the repression that civil society and citizens experience, as Sarah explains.
And unfortunately, many people think Uganda is a democratic country. The actors have branded Uganda as a hybrid democracy. So if you do not have the good understanding of the context, and many members of the international community think that Uganda is a democratic country. They think that we have freedoms and civil liberties as expected in any democratic country. The United States have branded Uganda as a hybrid democracy. And even when you interrogate them on that branding, to say what are the characteristics of a democratic country and do they exist in Uganda, then they find an excuse because of their interests. As states, they have interests in their partnerships that they make with the Republic of Uganda, and they must defend that branding of a hybrid democracy instead of calling it what it is, an authoritarian regime. So these are some of the narratives that we confront, and if you come from that background, then your partner will think that there's something wrong with you as an actor, not knowing that the context you are operating in is tilted against you. The odds are against you, and they do not need to delegitimize you because it results into double victimization. So this is what the organizations that were closed are struggling with, and it's a challenge. And so as a result, you have many actors dropping out of the struggle or of the cause. And over time, we'll have very few agencies working on democracy and people's rights and citizen participation in democracy in Uganda.
Sarah is clearly aware that Uganda is not an exception in the region. Rather, as she points out, there has been increased backsliding of democracy and good governance in East Africa.
Tanzania, it's even problematic. It's problematic because the shrinking civic space in Tanzania is terrible. But I don't know whether you can, how you can rank Tanzania and Rwanda. I don't know how free citizens of Rwanda participate in their governance. The freeness aspect. On the surface value, Rwanda looks okay. But you need to interrogate it further. The period I've assumed the chairmanship of the network, Rwanda has not had elections. I would like to see the freeness of the citizens in participation, especially those on the dissenting side in Rwanda. We have had incidences where presidential candidates are arrested, or both two female candidates, the presidential female candidates have all ended up in jail, released after so many years, their families destroyed. So I don't know how free the Rwandese are. Then when you come to Tanzania from the time of Magufuli, the late Magufuli, Tanzania wasn't all of a sudden. The country that we had thought was a safe haven for democracy in East Africa, all of a sudden dropped to negatives in terms of the way he treated those opposed to his rule, the way they treated civil society actors, the way they treated members of the media, the international community, the Law Society of Tanzania, with their president who was shot 6 times in broad daylight in his office. So you have all these three, including Uganda now. They are almost in a tie on authoritarianship. They tie in taking away civic liberties of the people. They are in a tie in taking away the political freedoms of the people. So I would lump Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda in the same category. You can only disagree depending on the aspect you're looking at. If you look at the last elections in Uganda, where people were even campaigning in bulletproof, where people were shot at for attempting to think that they can lead their nation. So we have our democracy characterized with 2 key features that stand out: family rule and militarism. So you have the family of President Museveni really treating Uganda as an extension of their farms, of their cattle farms. They think they can walk in, walk out, and do whatever they want. You have 3 top generals now coming from one family, father, brother, and son. They are top military generals. You have the Minister of Education with wife and sister leading the Ministry of Education, which is a core for social development of any nation. Then you have a niece leading health sector. Then you have an in-law of your niece leading agriculture. You know, we are basically under family capture that is facilitated by militarism in Uganda. So that's why I'm lumping up the 3 countries. It depends on which dimension you're looking at. But if you sum it up, the average is the same score. Then you have South Sudan that is really broken. And the comprehensive peace process and implementation of the peace deal has been going around in circles. And then, of course, Somalia, which is a failed state. It is really a chaotic region in terms of democracy. I wish they could. I'm not saying Kenya has perfected their democracy, but I wish the neighbors could learn 1 or 2 things in Kenya. And then there are a few aspects which make Kenya stand out. The freeness of participation, citizen participation, citizens' competence and participation, which I can rank at 60%. Then you have the independence of governance institutions, the Independent Election and Boundaries Commission of Kenya, the judiciary, and other governance institutions, which I could rank at 60%. And then they have the respect for the Constitution since 2010 that they all seem to be following and respecting. I wish the other neighbors could borrow a leaf.
Uganda, she faces multifaceted challenges that include misogyny and overall hostile environment for human rights activists.
You know, first is the operating environment. Very toxic. It's as if even political actors are safer than civic actors. The regime narrative of branding civic actors as agents of foreigners, of neo-colonialism, of people with no agenda. And then you have some elite. I think maybe we should call them pseudo-elite. Also trying to, propagate that same thinking, which is very unfortunate. Because the Constitution gives us liberties on paper to participate in our governance, either as individuals or through civic and political organizations in several provisions of the Constitution. But life gets harder when you are a woman because of our socialization, but also the natural roles we play in society. You have a lot of duties at the domestic level, the nature of our physique. We can't deal with violence. And then the environment where you find you have to run, people are surveilling you, most of civic actors have cameras on their vehicles. You can imagine that extent of an operating environment. You need the camera so that, just in case, you are able to trace who was it. CCTV camera on vehicles. We've been pushed to that extent. Because even when you're trailed and you need CCTV coverage from the National CCTV Camera Center, you might not get it. So you need your own. So the environment, I'm sure there are many women activists that would want to stand for social justice, for the vulnerable people, but the odds are too much against us. When you are in the space, I believe that our conscience guides us. What is it that you stand for? What are your beliefs? And we need to build social support around us. Who can I call? Who can I share with? Who can help me? Who can help me cross? It is very important. And that's the advice I would share with fellow women activists. I'm lucky that I come from a liberal background. Both my inner family and extended family are very liberal people that would not look at culture. But in many families, people would question, how can a woman do this? Who do you think you are? Where are you going? But you are a woman. Leave that for men. Stay in the home. So, but good enough, the women empowerment in Uganda has reached, to some extent, advanced. And many people understand that what a man can do, a woman can do. And the future is female.
This exceptional, strong woman has continued to endure challenges for 2 decades. What keeps Sarah going, and what is her advice to young women seeking to enter the civic space despite the difficulties and threats that currently hang over the civil society?
I think what is important, there are 2 important things. One is that always follow your conscience, follow your heart, follow your beliefs. They will guide you wherever you want to go. But the second most important issue is that activism is a lifetime. There is no point of return, no retreat, no surrender. So once you get in, know that it's a lifetime, and you will always be there standing up for the vulnerable, for the victims, for those who are suffering. So once you're not prepared to walk the whole journey, maybe you don't need to join. But once you join, your beliefs, values, and conscience will protect and guide you.